All right. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in, if you are, to another episode of Free Design Hour from Rocksaw Studios. It's a fun little thing we're doing here where we are providing an hour of free design. There's been a lot of questions from folks asking me how this works exactly. Is it just everybody getting in and having a big free-for-all? Is it people signing up for a certain slot and then they get an hour? Can they take that hour offline and not be online? Well, let's start with that last one first. No. I mean, the big benefit for us is the fact that we get to show off what we do sort of to the public and let everyone see it. It's a lot of fun for us. So we would rather the free design hour be here on AirMeet where everybody can see it. Whether it's a big free-for-all or not kind of depends on whether or not our slotted individual shows up for the day. My goal was to make sure that everyone got at least an hour if possible. So my goal was to have them set up, put them in a certain slot, say a certain day, get their files in advance, maybe start chatting with them a little bit pre-game about what I could do for them, and then come in, boom, help them out. If they don't show up, because that's sort of the nature of how things work, then we would have more of a free-for-all and just talk about stuff. Obviously, one of the benefits of me is that I can talk a lot about design thinking, product building, that type of thing. So I'm always happy to do that. Folks don't show up, well, you know what? There we go. So far, it does seem like Vinod from Barker is not showing up today. I haven't heard back from him since my last email, and that's just kind of how things work. So Vinod, if you're here, you should hop on because we're going to help you out. But if not, we do have a group of attendees here that are hanging out, chatting. So would love to talk with anybody who maybe has some kind of design thing that I can help them out with because that's my goal. Also, very excited, as nerdy as it may sound, because we are streaming to Facebook and YouTube live. And that's crazy. Last week we tried to do those things and they did not work out very well. And so that was kind of tough. But we figured it out thanks to the fantastic people at AirMeet helping us out and giving us some help on exactly what you do with streaming keys and all this other stuff. It's a whole world that I didn't even know existed and how do you live stream. And so finding that out has been a lot of fun. But if anybody's got any design-based questions, Free Design Hour is now pretty much opened up to the public, which is sort of crazy. So who knows what can show up? In the group, we do have a few people. I see some clients like Rusty, who is fantastic. I see Dylan. I see some other folks from Rocksaw and some other people as well. So if anybody has anything to talk about, just let me know because I'm more than happy to address some of those issues. But if not, well, then we're just going to design some stuff. What are we going to design? I don't know. That's what we're going to find out because there's a lot of design principles that I deal with on a regular basis. And whether it's showing off something fun in Figma, whether it's showing off something that's more design principle based, any of it can be possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to share my Figma. So hopefully Figma should be sharing. There we go. And I'll have my chat window open up over here. And I will let the great people at AirMeet know, hey, the live stream worked fantastically. And poor Vinod, he's missing out on his chance to be live on our YouTube and our Facebook. I mean, that's sad, right? Let's see here. All right, so let's talk about design principles in general. One of the big questions that we always get asked is sort of a easy one to answer, but it's only easy as in today because we changed this up a lot. And that is, what tool do we recommend people use for things like design, prototyping, iconography, visual design, all that stuff. And throughout the course of our company, it's changed. Obviously, software is always created, so that makes sense, right? But when we started off at Rocksoft, we were using Photoshop and Illustrator for a lot of our design. And if you've ever tried to use Photoshop or Illustrator for interface design, it's not really an easy thing to do. Photoshop gives you access to a whole lot of cool features, plugins, filters, things like that. But it's all roster-based. Now, they've worked on that a little bit and made things more vector-based. For those who don't know what that means, roster is pixels. So a raster-based image would be a bitmap, a JPEG, a GIF, a PNG, something like that, to where when you break it down, you can see the individual little pixels, right? If you ever zoomed into a JPEG or a photograph on the web and you notice that everybody's face sort of starts to look like an impressionistic painting, that's because it's raster. On the other side of this, we have what's called vector-based. And vector-based design is built with mathematics, mostly. I'm using curves, things like that. The benefit of vector over raster is that vector can scale infinitely. So no matter how big you design it 1 inch by 2 inch, you can take that same file and print it 3,000 inches by 3,000 inches because it's vector-based and the mathematics just scales up. It's exciting. So you want to do as much stuff as you can with vector whenever possible. But Photoshop was, especially back in the day when we founded Rocksoft 10 years ago, is very much a raster-based tool. So everything you didn't scale up when resolutions changed. And so it made a lot of additional work necessary. Every time a new iPhone would come out and they would increase that resolution, well, the team had to go back and re-upscale all the graphics. So we started using Illustrator for some things. Initially that was tough because there's a concept called skeuomorphism. And if you don't know what that means, I'm happy to tap out this fun word for you. Let's see here, I'm in my fun file, and I am not, there we go. Skeuomorphism. Look at that. What does skeuomorphism mean? Well, an easy way to think of skeuomorphism is making things look realistic. So if you remember the first iPhone, the buttons on that look like a button. The background textures look like background textures. There's a lot of carbon fiber, there's a lot of chrome, there's a lot of shininess going on. And that's because Steve Jobs, in his infinite wisdom, realized that for the first time, people were going to be interacting with a flat surface. And they didn't know what in the world they were going to be doing. And so he thought, well, let's make that easy for them. Let's make a button look like a button. Let's make a notepad where you write notes look like an actual notepad. So let's put a texture on it that makes it look like paper. So that was done primarily with raster-based graphics, because there's a lot of fun stuff and interesting things you could do in Illustrator that allows you to really play with different photographs, play with the different imagery, kind of compound things on top of each other and create different looks and feels. Now, eventually the tools in Illustrator started to increase and you could do a lot of fun skeuomorphic stuff in Illustrator, but it never quite matched up with Photoshop. Time went on and a lot of us realized that Illustrator wasn't the best tool for designing software. It was great for icons, logos, branding, things like that. And obviously Photoshop is still sort of the industry standard when it comes to photographic manipulation. If I need to make a photograph look better, I'm going to Photoshop. If I need to create a mask or expand something, I'm going to Photoshop to do that. Then I bring that into my other tools. But Illustrator was never really built very well for interface design. When you open an Illustrator file, we would create what's called an artboard. An artboard is basically, say, would be a screen. And you can only have so many screens in Illustrator. And so we would often have some applications or some pieces of software that we build where we design these things. And I'm not kidding you. We'd have 2 or 3 different files. We'd have file 1, 2, and 3. And we'd have to communicate how they connected to each other because we'd reached the limit of what Illustrator would allow us to do. Then along came Sketch. Sketch sort of changed everything for us because it was very much an interface-based application. The goal of Sketch wasn't to design fine art. It wasn't to design illustrations and things like that. It was for interfaces. It was like, hey, you want to design iPhone apps? Here you go. You want to design websites? Okay, you got Sketch. Everything we do in Sketch is going to be built around Illustrator or built around interface design. It was really cool. And then some other tools kind of came out and they tried to compete with Sketch and they all sort of acted similarly. One of those is, as Dylan in the chat has now brought up, one of those was an application called Adobe Xd. And Adobe Xd is extremely interesting. Number one, as a design studio, we have the full Adobe suite. I use Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator on a regular basis. So having access to XD is really cool, right? Because XD is built in. I don't have to pay extra for it because I'm already paying for my Adobe suite. The problem with XD is that early on, it wasn't nearly as full-featured as Sketch. It did some of the stuff. Interface-wise, it's sort of funny because when you look at Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, there's a visual language to the Adobe applications. And some would call that organized chaos. Let's be upfront. A Photoshop palette is an extremely complicated looking thing, right? The number of windows you can have in Photoshop or Illustrator or After Effects is ridiculous. But it's powerful, and it's for power users. XD was much more like Sketch, which is much more simplified. And so XD wasn't quite up to the task yet, right? Because at the time, it just didn't have the ability to do as many things as Sketch could do. But it was on our horizon. We went, you know what? This could be a great tool for us to move to. RJ, who is one of my senior designers at Rocks, he's sort of one of the keepers of what software we're using. I mean, we all make a decision as a team, but RJ lets us know, yeah, that'd be stupid to move there, Q. Don't do that. That's just not ready for prime time yet. And so for the longest time, XD wasn't ready for prime time. It just didn't have the feature sets we needed. So we kept using Sketch, hoping that XD would eventually come along. What ended up happening was this piece of software that you currently see right now, and that we do a lot of videos on, called Figma, came out. And Figma, at first, was pretty much just another version of Sketch, but it had some other cool stuff associated with it. One of the things that it does is that it allows you to see CSS for what it is you're building. So if you look here at my screen here, you can see that for the word skeuomorphism, it's telling me what the size of this box is, what the height is, how far it is from the top and the left, obviously what the content is. But look at this, the name of the font, the weight of the font, the size, the line height, even the letter spacing, the colors. And then when you get down here, whoa, look at that. You have actual CSS. CSS that a development team can then copy and paste into their browsers or into their development environments. And that's a huge deal because one of the biggest issues that designers have with developers is this bridging this gap between, okay, well, I spent literally 3 hours moving that pixel up and down, right? I know it just looks like 5 pixels. I understand. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but really, I spent a lot of time trying to get the exact perfect feng shui, the balance of what the screen would look like. So I need the design to be represented in the development. When you provide someone CSS like this, it helps with that. Figma's CSS wasn't that great at first. It was solid, but there were some things that it didn't do really well. So we didn't use it so much. But the other big benefit that Figma had is this collaboration capability. And if you look up here at the top, you can see Q Manning, me. But I can invite RJ, I can invite Chris, I can invite my clients, I can invite pretty much anyone to this file directly, and they can work with me. And that is exciting because they're able to come in real time to this file and move things around, talk with people, make comments. So you see, I can change this to anyone with the link. I can copy this link. And I can come over here into our live chat and I can literally paste it. So now, via the web, anyone who wants to will be able to come in and actually work in this file with us. Like anybody who's got this link can come in and start making comments and doing stuff. It's extremely powerful. When you're showing your client work, when you're working with a fellow designer, how useful is it to not have to worry about, well, let's hop on a quick call, let's walk through stuff, let's chat about things. You give me your feedback in a PDF and then I'll try to figure out what that means. How much easier is it if I can literally just say, hey, come into the file with me and let's have some fun together, right? Tell me what you don't like. So as a client, I can come in and go, not a fan of this font. It's boring. And post it. And then boom, now I have that comment listed for me to review later on down the line. So when I provide a client a design, I bring them their ideas to life. They can literally go in and just geolocate wherever they don't like something or do like something and let me know specifics. But then my design team can come in and actually work with me. So if we have a big concept we're working on, which we often do, when we're working on large problems, we want to get everybody involved. we will want to bring people in and say, okay, this is the problem we're trying to work on. What are you thinking? And it is not unheard of to have, say, Chris, my creative director, talking with the team through, say, Google Hangouts or whatever else, whatever audio visual medium we're using. We're on Google Meets, we're talking. And Chris will be talking about what he's doing. We'll all be in the Figma file looking at what he's doing. Chris will be working through an interface. He'll be trying things out. I will literally copy the frame, right? So say, here's Chris's frame. I copy it, duplicate it, bring it over here, and I'll start doing my own thing. Completely opposite of Chris. So that what I'm doing doesn't interfere with him whatsoever. So I can take the design he's messing with, that he's working with. If I have an idea that I want to go down, if I want to experiment, I want to try, I can do it. And I can do it real time. I can then tell Chris, hey, Chris, come over here. Check this out. Look at this. Look at this crazy box that I put in, right? What if we tried to go with a crazy design color? What if we were like, you know what, let's make it primary green or whatever color we wanted to make it? We would have that opportunity, right? Chris could then see that real time and could bring it in. It also lets you very quickly work with clients to show them interesting things. Because if you're working with a client and they have an idea, the typical design agency methodology goes like this. You give me your idea, I take it, I then estimate it, you approve it, we move back, we go back to the design. You say, okay, that's great. I do a version of it. I send it over to you. Then you tell me what you didn't like, what you did like, and we just kind of repeat this process. But now, you as a client, I can say, hey, let's hop in Figma. I send you a link. You don't have to download the software. You pull it up in your Chrome browser or your Safari browser, and it's right there. And now, real time, you can see me move things around. So if you say, maybe I'm crazy, but what if we did this? We can try it out. We can see what it is. And you can know if it did or didn't work. I can show you previous old versions of things really quickly. We can have design experiment and design ideas without having to worry about the long acceptance criteria that comes with a typical project. And so when Dylan asks about Adobe Xd, the truth is I haven't tried out Xd in a while because Figma really did kind of rock our socks off, right? Like we're rocked off, but it rocked our socks off with just what it could do collaboration-wise. And that was so exciting. And we said, okay, we're going to keep moving this direction. Maybe Xd will come along, but it was offering so much more than what Sketch did. We're on a whole different level. And at this point, with the amount of time and love and investment that Figma has put in, it's sort of become a no-brainer for a lot of designers to move in this direction. Because outside of just the standard stuff we're looking at when it comes to what you can do with the application itself, design-wise, things like that, you have a whole community of great plugins that you can utilize, right? I can find assets that I want to have. Say I'm in the middle of the design, and my customer goes, okay, that's cool, but what does my app actually look like on a phone, right? So I can type in iPhone, search through it, and look at these. These are all available for me to just get. And I can duplicate this. I can play with it, some interface ideas. I can get actual frames here for projects to put on websites to show off work, things like that. There are plugins that are available. So one of the big benefits of Figma has been the plugin community. So if I go to the plugins of what Figma has, there's so much I can just do. It's letting me play with different rulers. It's letting me have different capabilities for searching things, add in different images, and having a robust plugin community is what you want to see in a platform, whether it's a web platform like WordPress or Sitecore, whatever you may be using, whether it's a project management piece of software like Basecamp that you may use. When you see a robust community of individuals who want to create and provide plugins or add-ons for that software, you know that software is kicking ass. And you know that there's no end in sight of what it can do. So if I'm in my Figma community, and this is beta because it previously was just plugins, and now they sort of modified this to make it more than just plugins. Say I need to have lorem ipsum, right? Like what designer doesn't need fake text? Well, there we go. Look at all these different lorem ipsum generators. I can easily install any of these and just use them. at a snap. If I need profile images, right? Like what design in 2020 and going on to 2021, what design doesn't have profile photographs, right? So you see here, user profile images, displays beautiful user profile photos in my design prototype. So what do? I install it, done. Now I have access to that. It was that fast. That's powerful. And Figma has really grown their community to be robust. It's not simply just, okay, a design tool. They're really focusing on how do we make this feel like a community of designers working together to build great things? How do we share stuff back and forth? How do we share templates? How do we share what we're doing so that other people can take advantage of the neat things that we have? So it's really feels a little bit hippie-ish, I understand, but design is often a siloed concept. It's one of the scary things about design, is that as a designer, what we do is we sit down, we open up this blank canvas, just like a writer would, and we're going, okay, well, here's my design, right? I need to make a new website. So what am I going to do? Well, I know my new website needs to be within a fold. So I'm going to use our default fold here, which is 1280 by 720. Oops, where did we go here? There we are. Click this. So the designer, I'm sitting here looking at this blank canvas, and this is going to be called company website, right? And I'm staring at it. I'm wondering, what in the world am I going to do? I'm just going to design on my own. If you have client criteria and you have a team you're working with, you can completely change that equation. I can say, hey, Chris, come in. Let's go into this file. Help me figure out what it is we're going to do with company website. And I can start designing things. So some design advices are going along here. Obviously, you do want your website to be 1280 by 720. Now, can your website be bigger than that? Yeah, your website can be bigger than that. We want that. That's a great thing. But the goal of 1280 by 720 is that a significant number of computers have been created who have a resolution of 1280 by something. 720, 750, 800, whatever it may be. But the 1280 is sort of the common denominator. So if you can make sure your design fits within 1280 by 720, you're on the right path. Because as we get bigger, so Figma, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to center this so that no matter what I do, this object is always centered to the canvas. Why do I want to do that? Because when I come here and I go, well, that's the 1280 version, company website, 1280. What if I have a 1920? Oops, there we go. Over here. 1920. There we go. Okay. So say I have one that's 1920. So I want to go 1920 by 1080. Right. So as you can see, this has stayed the same size, but now it's centered here. So that even if I'm in a 1920 by 1080 environment, and what environment is that? It's TV. So how many times have you been in a presentation with a client or a customer and they want to view things full screen on a television? You got to keep that stuff factored in. You got to think about those kind of things. And you need to know, well, what is my site going to do? So we have our nav up here, and we have our hero image here. And then we have our paragraphs of text and images over here, which are just basic design things, right? Like this isn't anything fancy. This is just sort of how things work on the web. We can start to imagine what it looks like when we are at a higher resolution. There we go. And then I'll take this same stuff. Now, typically what you do is you design at one resolution, and then when you got done, you'd move it over to a different resolution and see how things work. But this is why the concept of the fold is so vital. And I know that my team at Rocks sometimes gets frustrated with me banging the gong, hitting the drum of the fold, the fold, got to think about the fold. Think about the fold. The fold. The reason why is because so often people come to a website and they don't know that they can scroll. I know that may sound silly because who doesn't know they can scroll on a website? But if you watch actual user recordings of users in a website, so frequently, if your content cuts off right at the bottom, what they'll do is they'll bounce because they didn't know they could go forward any further. Part of it comes from these devices or tablets where we're used to seeing things full screen. And so we don't know we can go any further because we're not thinking to scroll necessarily. So what you want to do in a design is you want to give someone just a little bit of a teaser, what we call peekaboo content. That's what I call it at Rock Sauce because it's cute and I like cute things. What I call peekaboo content, which is just to say a little bit of content poking up from the bottom so that a user knows, hey, I can scroll. If the page doesn't end here, right? The page keeps going. There's more content down below. There's a fun image down here. There's some text down here, and the text is cut off, so I need to keep scrolling. If I just did something like this, how does the user know necessarily that there's more content? They don't. Now, you would hope that they would scroll, but you don't know if they will. And so you always want to try to consider the fold in your design. And you always want to try to contemplate, okay, what content's going to peak just above that edge that tells them, hey, you can scroll down. Now, another option is to let them know they can scroll. And you've seen this on websites, right? Where somebody just goes, scroll for more. As silly as that sounds, people do it. I do it. Because sometimes you want a big image. You want maybe a big photograph, something similar. So you put down at the bottom left, scroll for more, and you'll create a nice little arrow. This may be animated. That shows them, hey, you can keep scrolling. So that way they go, okay, cool, I got you, dude. You're doing a full screen thing. This is going to be a fun experience. And I almost say that with a tongue in cheek. But there's more to this site than just that. And they know it, but again, you kind of have to let them know. You kind of have to tell them just so that there's no confusion about it. So if you have something like this, as silly as it sounds, some kind of scrolling indicator, boom. Well, now I, as a user, know I can scroll for more content. There's more stuff below this fold. And I'm not going to be stuck just on this main home screen, right? Now, we talked about Figma and why we're using Figma versus, say, some other pieces of software. One of the reasons has been what we're all facing, and that's the COVID epidemic. Everybody's at home. Nobody's going into the office. We're all here looking at computer screens. And a lot of us miss that camaraderie we have as designers because my team knows that if I'm in the middle of designing something or they're in the middle of designing something, they can just come over, bring their laptops, or have me pull up a link and have me look at it. Or say, hey, Q, come over to the office, check this out. What do you think? And I give them real-time feedback. Well, that's gone away because I'm at my house. And yeah, they could just hop on Slack, which is the communication tool we use to communicate in our office, and say, hey, let's hop on a screen share. Let me show you this, blah, blah, blah. Or they can just send me a link to their Slack, and I can walk through them real time and see what they're doing. I can give them real time feedback. I can see what they're doing. We can design together. We can hop on a Slack call and actually have that communication real time. And that's exciting. And because we've had to move to work from home, those collaboration tools have been so useful. But imagine how much power that gives you as a designer or as a client to work with your design team, right? The other big benefit, and Adobe Xd has this as well, is that it is cross-platform. It's not just on Mac. And Sketch did have that issue. Sketch, again, is a great tool. Sketch had a whole lot of influence on things like Figma, on XD, on other tools that are out there. Sketch was sort of, I mean, kind of a grandfather of all of them, but people have moved on because other tools tried out some really cool, interesting stuff. And so here we go. We have Figma doing all these great things with collaboration, plugins, other great stuff. And then Figma keeps pushing the bar beyond things that I could ever imagine. Things like auto layout are massively beneficial, you know, to doing just simple design things like navigations, things like that. You know, auto layout is something as simple as if I go, I want to have a navigation here at the top, right? We have this little block. So I'm going to have home, right? We all have homes on our websites. And then, of course, you have, say, services. And then you have about, because people want to know who you are. I'm going to zoom in here just because there's no reason to be so tiny. Okay, so I have these three. So say that's my, oh, you got to have contact, right? Now look at this. I know that's silly, but the fact that it tells me how far apart the pieces are is so useful. It's nice to make sure that everything is nice and equal, and I can easily go in and just fit all this stuff together. Look at that. Right? Consistency, it matters. Okay. So, oops. So we have contact. Okay. So we all have, that's our navigation. That's a very simple navigation, right? And in the old days, we would just put this over here, get the top right, boom, 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 navigation. What would happen? Well, somebody in the sales team would say, hey, so I talked to the client. The client said that really, they didn't understand that we could do some kind of platform development. So we need to have a navigation link that's specifically for platform development. So I have to come in here into all my designs and have to move all the stuff around, right, and try to add another link. But Figma has this thing called auto layout, and it is my favorite. It's probably my favorite thing in the world because it's so useful. So instead of having a group here, what we're going to do is we are going to add auto layout to this. We'll call it navigation. Okay, so what does auto layout do? If you look over here on the right side in Figma, you'll see spacing between items, vertical padding of items, and horizontal padding of items. Here you have where it constrains onto the canvas. So I want it to be on the right, so on the right side of navigation. And if I'm going to increase the size of the screen, I always want it to stay on the right side. Okay. So what did my salesperson say? Well, the salesperson said, you know what, folks really want to know what platforms we do work on. Well, instead of having to do all that work with the navigation, I will select one of these, I'll hit Command D, I'll duplicate it, and suddenly, look at this. It just adds it right in. So I want to add a blog. That's the power of something as simple as auto layout. It saves so much time and effort. So much time was spent not being able to easily add items to menus. I know it doesn't seem like something that would take a designer a long time to do, but it did. It was a pain in our butts. And so auto layout comes in and saves us from those kind of problems and allows us to create menus that can change on multiple pages through components and other great items that Figma has, real time, really quickly, and just save a lot of work. Now, here we have Rusty asking a question. So Rusty's asking, looks a lot more user-friendly working between the designer and the customer. And I agree, Rusty. You know, when we built Patriotic Colors for you, we didn't have Figma. I think Figma may have just been launched, and it wasn't high enough caliber yet for us to say, ooh, let's all switch over to it. That's changed. And so now if we were building Patriotic Colors, we would be working with you real time using something like Figma. So you could give us your ideas. It'd be really interesting to hang out and work through things so you could see some of the cool ideas we were doing for filters or other things for you. You could see them in real time. And we would have had that opportunity with something like Figma versus just sending you, say, PNGs or PDF files or doing walkthroughs of the project, which is what we end up having to do because we're using something like Sketch. Again, there's not a problem with doing things that way. Those things work great. It's just there's a little bit of a faster way to do that when you can collaborate real time on something like a Figma. So the other benefit, and this is getting more and more robust, when we first started using Figma. I looked at the auto layout, and then I looked over here at the CSS in the inspect tab over here to see what the code is. Because again, it's very important that developers can replicate what you're building. It does you no good as a designer, and does your designers no good to design something if the development team can't implement that as designed, right? I mean, the development team's got to be able to do that. But designers sometimes do crazy stuff. It's a little bit complicated. Initially, auto layout didn't use what's called CSS flex, and now it does. So now we have this ability to create really great CSS that the developer could just copy and paste in and be able to create this menu to work the same way that it does here. So that when you remove an item, everything sort of reorganizes, right? You don't have a big gaping hole here. If I didn't have auto layout and my salesperson came in and said, well, Q, guess what? Nobody cares about platforms. And I went, okay, well, look at that. Now I have a big hole. So I have to go in to every single time I have a menu and I have to do this. I have to line it all up and make sure it fits. It's a pain, y'all. Nobody wants to do that. Whereas when I have auto layout, and this is the Command Z world of me backing up through my file. If I delete it, it's gone, and it's great. And it doesn't just work one layer deep. So say I have a company logo. And that's sitting over here. Company logo. Right. So there it is. Okay. So I can now put the two of these into an auto layout and call this top nav. So now that's to the left, that's to the right, and you can see there's spacing in between the 676 pixels. Now I can make it different. I can make it 50. You can do that. But again, it's useful because if I need to add another item in, say a secondary nav, right, I can do that. So I can take this whole navigation and call this main navigation. And you know that sometimes websites do have secondary navs. They don't just have that main navigation that lets you move through the main sections. They also have the contact area, maybe a telephone number, something like that, right? So say I duplicate this. And because I've set this to be that far apart, I need to come in and go, okay, now these two navigations. And this is going to be my much more simple nav. And this is just going to be a telephone number. 866-555-1234. Okay. So now what I can do is I can take these two, actually add an auto layout to those, just those alone. Call it right navigations. And inside of that, I have main navigation and I have contact navigation. And the reason you want that to be its own navigation is you may want to add another item in there. You may want to add a contact us button, right? Because who doesn't do those? So contact us. Maybe I want that to be text aligned right. And for this one, maybe we want a box around it. So I'll add another little frame just around that box. Contact button. The other benefit of these auto frames isn't just the space between items, but it is actually allowing you to create dynamic, interesting buttons. So I can come here, and now I have a contact us button. And if I want these to be bigger, I can. Then I have this over here, right? And these items are all working together. And now in my larger navigation, I can find what size I want this to be. So now I have multiple things, but between these two items, I can continue to modify this, I can continue to modify this, and it just allows me to much more easily manipulate things. And that's the ultimate goal here, is how do we make our job easier? How do we make things faster and quicker so we can remove things and not have it destroy everything? And that's our goal, all right? So that's some of the fun of Figma. And this has also been a little bit of a primer on basic web design, because we talked about the fold. One of the other big benefits of Figma, let me delete this 1920 by 1080 version. And along the way, we lost a little down arrow here. So I'm going to create a new one. And there's not I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's a right way to create things like arrows. I know there are actual plugins that let you create arrows, which are probably a lot easier to use, but we all have our own ways of doing things. For me, I find that I just like to often create boxes like this and then just create them from scratch, because then I can manipulate them to my full advantage. There we go. Let's make this nice and big, and then we want it to be rounded. So there we go. Look at that. Boom. Okay. But I don't want it to be quite that big, so I'm going to shrink it down some. Here we go. And I want to center these things together. And it doesn't center quite right, because these aren't good even numbers. So 13, there we go. There we go. Okay. I will actually merge these together, combine selection here. Okay. Boom, there we go. So we talked about prototyping, and we talked about one of the benefits of Figma. And that is going to be, this is version 1, this will be version 2, okay? Now, say I want it so that when you're on the page, you see this little arrow move up and down, because you want it to indicate, hey, you know what? You can actually kind of move up and down and have fun here. You can scroll with this. That animation is a micro interaction. And micro interactions and transitions inspire people to move forward. They're fun, they're exciting, they're visually engaging, right? So you want to work those into your products as much as you can, because it makes things feel alive. So I want to make sure we're doing that here on our design, so that we're telling people, hey, you can scroll, but it's not just scrolling. We're going to let you have a little bit of fun when you scroll. And we want to draw their attention to it, not just the word. So you see I've got this and this. So I'm going to make sure they're named the same thing in between objects. So this is going to be arrow. And on my version 2, that's going to be called arrow. I'm going to figure out what I want my starting position to be. I want it to be up here. Okay? So it's going to start there. And then it's going to go to there. Okay? I'm going to come here. I'm going to select this object. You see? Go to prototype, because we're going to create an interactive prototype that people can play with. And I'm going to do what's called a delay. So that means after so much time, move on to the next screen. I'm going to do something really simple here. It'll be 300 milliseconds. I'm going to tell it to, after 300 milliseconds, I want you to go to page 2. So when 300 milliseconds has passed, go to page 2. And Figma has this really cool capability that is called Smart Animate. Smart Animate is absolutely rocking. It sort of figures out like what the coolest way would be to animate point A to point B. So if you have an arrow up, it's going to figure out like, well, what can I do to make it down? If you take that arrow and you reduce aspects of it, right? So like you make it taller, make it wider, it will animate in as well. So you're not taking all the time that you normally would in a piece of animation software to define what each characteristic is as things go along. So if I'm going to design something in, say, After Effects, and I want to create what my micro interactions or transitions would be from A to B in After Effects, I've got to define all that myself. Okay, it moves from 200 pixels to the left to 800 pixels to the right. Check. It increases in stroke weight from a 1 to a 6. Check. The color changes from this to this. I have to do each one of these things by hand. How long it's going to take, it's a huge amount of work. Smart Animate fills in the gaps on a lot of that stuff. Is it perfect? No. Nothing that's automated is ever going to be perfect. But does it get you really far in the process? Yeah, it does. And I'm going to show you why it's so neat and why it's so cool. So, you see here, I've got it up, and I want to move it down. When my goal here, what I'm trying to create, and we're going to see how this works. I'm doing this real time. I haven't practiced this before. What I wanted to do is do this sort of a bouncy up and down thing, right? You've seen that. Just where it goes boom, boom, up, down, as you're waiting for someone to get involved. So I have it on delay, 300 milliseconds. It's going to go to the next screen and take 300 milliseconds. And you can see, Figma gives you a cool little animation here of how long things are going to take. Give you a little preview of what it's going to be. Like if I go, watch how long that takes. That's even like that. It takes so long. Look at that. Wow. That would be a really long time, right? That's too long. We don't want that. So, and by default, I think it does 300. So I just use 300 a lot. 300 feels good. All right. So here to here. So if I come here and I hit play, which is what you do when you want to see your animation, what's going to happen? You saw it move down. I hit R to refresh. So you see it move down. That's cool, right? But I want it to go back up, and then I want it to come back down, and then I want it to go back up, and then I want it to come back down. I could create an animated GIF, literally, in After Effects or Photoshop, and bring that in, and it would do that. That's a great idea if you can do that. One of the wonderful things about Figma is you can bring in animated GIFs, and it will play real time in your previews. It's a lot of fun. It's great for mimicking video or complex animations that you can't do through Smart Animate. But this way, we can do it through Smart Animate. So we're going to come here. So now in this one, well, I just need to tell it to go back. After a delay of the same 300 milliseconds, swap with the first screen. Smart Animate, 300 milliseconds. Now, easing. Easing is, how do you explain easing to someone who doesn't know what easing is? A lot of folks out there may understand what this is, but you want things to feel organic and real. We don't want things to feel robotic. We don't want things to be on, off. When you use an animation style of linear, if we look on here, they have some different options available for us. So if we use linear, that you see listed out here, sorry, that's the wrong one. That's just going to be literally move from A to B. Easing, think of it as, well, what the word ease means, right? Like you ease into something. If you literally got into a bathtub, what's going to happen, right? You literally get into the bathtub, you just go flop in the bathtub. If you ease into the bathtub, you kind of, going to move on down to that bathtub. So it's good. I'm easing into the bathtub. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. That's what easing does in animation. It's easing. It feels good. And so what we do is we decide how we want to ease. You can either ease in, ease out, or ease in and out. Or you can ease in back, ease out back, ease in and out back. So we're going to do, for fun, just so you can see what it looks like, ease in and out back. Okay. Now, I'm going to come over to here to this one. This goes to there, right? Ease in and out back, right? And this one, what are we doing? Ease in and out back. Now, theoretically, hypothetically, this should do what we want it to do. So let's find out. I'm going to hit play. Now, we may not love the way that looks, and we need to tweak it, right? Because it feels, our arrow feels like it's stabbing, right? And you may want that effect. You may want to emphatically say, scroll right now, scroll right now. Probably not what you're looking for. But if it is, I just showed you how to do it. That's cool, right? So what you have to do is you have to play with stuff. Design is experimentation, just like anything else. You have to figure out the right way that you want to do it. So what we would do is we would start to look, okay, well, what style animations do we want to use? Do we want to ease out and back? Do we want to play with it a little bit differently? What's the right idea here? So we would come in, we'd say, well, we didn't like that. So let's just go with ease. What happens if we ease in on both of these? Does that fix my situation? And I have a suspicion that it's not going to fix it, and I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so it feels a little bit better. It's not as jabby. But so why is this taking so long? Why is it doing that? Well, if we look at our interactions, I'm telling it to wait 300 milliseconds before it goes to the next action. Okay? And that can be fine on the first page. But on the second page, that's creating a problem. Why? Because I'm saying, okay, so the arrow went down. Now wait 300 more milliseconds, then move the arrow back up. But that's not the feeling we want, is it? We want it to be sort of this organic, non-stop, continuous motion movement. Well, if I'm telling it to stop at 300 when it gets here and wait 300 milliseconds before it moves back up, well, I'm literally telling it create the stabbing motion. So I didn't think that that's what would happen, but it did. And the system gave me what I asked for. That's what we call a human error. So what I'll come back here and do is I will hopefully try to fix that by making it just 1 millisecond, which says basically no time at all. And what happens if we do this? We're going to play it. See, it does work better. But again, we have sort of this weird delay up top because again, this one is being told how much time. It's being told 300. So now we're going to go like this. And now we have a little bit more of a bouncy. Now you say, okay, Q, but that's going to give me an anxiety attack because it's going so fast. I agree. So let's do 1500 milliseconds it takes for it to now go between the two items. Now that's nice and slow. That's a pretty big increase. Look at that. Whoa, look at that. Now that's a little bit better, right? That feels a little better. We're going up too high. How do we fix that? Well, because luckily it's smart animates, we can just go a little bit above it. Just barely move. So if we look at the difference between these two, it's pretty insignificant. Oops, it did not do what I wanted to do. I don't know why I went so high. There we go. There you go. So now you just have a slight little bitty movement. And you can see how you could just start to tweak it from here. Would I be done with that? No. That would not be finished for me. I would keep tweaking with that. But you can see that if you're to show a client and your goal here is to say, okay, client, here's my job. Or if your designer is showing you something and you are a client and they're showing you this, you would understand this idea of, okay, at the bottom of the page, I'm going to have a little bouncy scroll indicator. I get you. I know what you mean. You don't have to figure out what it looks like because the designer has gone that extra distance to actually show you what it's going to look like. And it makes that whole thing just start to come alive a little bit more. It makes it feel a little more real. So when you're looking at an interactive prototype, it feels like an actual website would. And you can apply that throughout the whole situation. I can do fun stuff like this. When we come to a website, things can either load up automatically. Oops, I don't want to do this anymore. They can load up automatically or not. So we don't want this gray box back here anymore. So I'm going to get rid of that. That's not you doing some good. But what if we didn't want our navigation to be there right off the bat? Well, we've already created some time between these two things. So we could have the navigation literally come down. But I know it's about to happen, and you're going to laugh when you see it happen. But, boom. Whoa, where'd my navigation go? Hey, what? I want to I can't click. Stop. That would be fun. That's a very interesting way to do mystery meat navigation. That's a challenge for your users. Try to click my links. Nope, you couldn't do it. Can you do it? Can you get? Oh, I couldn't get it. Oh, God, Q, I hate you. Can you? Oh, I can't click it. It'd be a fun thing to try. But you can see how you could have that come in. But if we just want to step back, I'll delete this navigation here. And the big deal here is you just want to make sure the way that Figma works in doing its navigation or doing its smart animate is if things are named the same thing and they're in the same place, that's all that matters. So what I want to do is I want to kind of modify this a little bit. And I want to have this one be the first screen. That has that there. Yep, that's good. Maybe this isn't even there yet. Maybe it hasn't even appeared. Or maybe it is off screen. So maybe I want my arrow to pop up when this happens. Okay, and now I'm going to take this navigation, move it off. And I'm going to go back and rename these just to make my life easier. 2. And 3. And now this will be 1. Now over here in Figma, I want to change my starting screen. So I want to start with screen 1. So screen 1, my navigation is off screen. So I want to say that I want it to, after, let's do 150 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, I want it to go to the next screen, which is going to be this screen right here. Boom. Do this. I gotta make sure I choose the right screen. Screen 1. I have here. That should be screen 3. Silly Q. All right, and this should be screen 1. There we go. So I want to tell it, move to screen 2 after X amount of time. Easy enough. Okay. Then this screen, I do want it to wait a couple of seconds now. Actually, I won't do that. So right now, we want it to do is 1 millisecond. It's going to go to screen 3. And then what's screen 3 going to do? Screen 3 is then going to come back and go to screen 2. So it's going to do the little bouncing arrow thing we did. And again, I want my prototype to start off with screen 1. So theoretically, what should happen is our arrow should come up from the bottom and our navigation should come down from the top. There we go. And now you can see goes into the loop of our little arrow moving quicker. And because 1500 seconds is too long of a time, I want to make this 500. 500. And we'll play it again. Look at that. How neat was that? So now we just had a website where the navigation comes in, bloop, and you have some cool, interesting visual micro interactions and transitions that happen from A to B that are fun when you come to a website. And that just makes your site feel a little bit more alive. And you can design that stuff here in Figma. And then when you pass off your designs to your developer, or you pass off to your client, or if your client, when you get those designs, you know that you have an idea of what it is your design team is thinking and how your site's going to interact and how it's going to work with people. Micro interactions matter because people want to know they can interact with things. They want to have some sort of excitement that pushes them forward. Micro interactions are really good when it comes to pushing a narrative on a website. Transitions the same way. If I need you to read this, then this, then this, and then go to here, because that's the story I'm trying to tell about my company, what's a better way than to actually animate? This moves in, then this moves in, and then your eye is drawn here. And as a user, I don't have a choice but to go A, B, C. It's really cool. The additional benefit is that it feels cool. It looks fancy, and it's fun. And now your developers will know the timing that you're thinking of, and your clients will know, okay, cool. I know what it is I'm getting. And there's no question mark. There's no imagination needed to figure it out. So with that said, we're now at an hour. So I have talked pretty much for an hour and kind of fill in the gaps here on what you can do with Figma, because it is free design hour. one of the things that Dylan asks was that they're in the process of their legacy desktop products to a cloud-based, multi-platform, multilingual product suite. Okay. What initial design consulting would I recommend to ensure that they get started with a good set of design standards and framework? Ah, very cool. All right. So, Dylan, you're looking to move into a big thing. Your job is to, I guess, digitally transform. We don't get to use that phrase enough anymore because it's used so frequently, but you're doing an actual digital transformation project, which is exciting. And you want to bring your stuff into the modern era. And I don't blame you. I mean, right now is probably the perfect time to do that. Everything is changing because of everybody staying at home and everybody not being around in the office. Because of that, it's a good time to change things up because when someone's software changes, when their interface changes, they don't freak out as much because they're pretty much accustomed to change at this point in their lives. It's also a good way to use down cycles. So that's great. So what would I recommend as far as design consulting, things like that? Number one, a deep analysis of what it is that you're doing. Okay. What technology stacks? What platforms? What's the hardware look like? What are the environments? What are the users? What's their level of knowledge? What's their level of expertise? Can someone come in right from the ground up? Can you hire somebody tomorrow and they immediately get to working on your suite? Or do they need to go through the manual that's attached to it? Okay. You want to get that groundwork right off the bat for all that stuff. The next thing would be probably something like an innovation workshop is what I would recommend after that. Innovation workshop is where a company like Rocksoft, and do my job here. Rocksoft is more than happy to help you out, Dylan, with your project to make this thing awesome. A company like Rocksoft will come in, we'll sit down with you, and we'll say, okay, what are our goals with this? We know it's 2020, about to be 2021, and we need to move to a cloud-based solution. We get that. But what else do we need to do? What else is there? What problems could we solve? What issues have you been hearing from your user base that haven't been touched because this is an antiquated piece of software? Every large company we work with, and we've worked with some big names and some big companies on some really big projects, and we've completely transformed construction for probably the largest construction company in the world and turned it completely digital, where they went through these big binders they had, like little binders of paper where they were logging things manually. And we took all that, put it on the cloud, and we're saving almost $100 million per project wherever it's deployed, right? And we created full suites of software that all interact with each other. The reason I'm bringing that up is that they were not anywhere near ready for digital transformation. But we had to figure out, well, what are you trying to solve? It's not just for the purpose of being more modern, is it? That can't be the only reason. If you start off with that, then what you end up with is a solution that is engineered well, but it may not actually work well for the user. So we would have that innovation workshop and we'd sit down and go, who are our primary demographic? Who are our users in the company or externally? What do they need? And over the last number of years, what has been their biggest complaint? Like, what have they been saying that's not working? What do we actually really want to solve? And if we could choose what it is that they would accomplish with what we're building, what would it be? What new thing do we want them to suddenly be able to do that they could never do before? Those become what we call how might we's and can we's. How might we create a better user interface that gets people to actually log their time? Can we get people to be inspired enough to log into our system every day, right? We use these kind of phrases. How might we's are basically goals of where you want to go, and can we's are sort of the negative naysayers that you may have in a meeting. We've all been in those meetings, right, to where somebody will say, oh, it would be awesome. What if we did this? And then there's some guy or girl in the corner going, you can never do that because so-and-so would never allow us to, right? And the can we's are that person. You want to have all those in the room because you want to address those, because that person, though they may think them as a naysayer, they're doing you a huge favor. A user is going to immediately have a problem with something. So how can you fix that? So you start off with that innovation workshop. And that really does get down to the strategy of what you're trying to solve and why you're trying to solve it. But then leads into how are you trying to solve it? So you can create your number one goals. From that, you move into either an initial design phase with some strategy where you're not going to roll some things out, or you do what's called a design sprint. Design sprints are real quick, 1 week turnaround, right? So literally the team gets together and they say, okay, from our innovation workshop, we said that the most important thing for this new piece of software was that people could quickly log their time, just for example. I don't know if that's what you're trying to do, Dylan, but we're going to use that as an example. So what can we do that'll help people quickly log their time? Well, let's try these things out. Let's try these specific items in our interface, because these are the problems we've heard. So you take all the data from the innovation workshop, you focus on that one problem, and you say, let's create a quick design mock-up. Let's create an interactive prototype that focuses on one goal. How do we get people to log their time faster? Create that within a week. You sit down with the team, you're chatting through it, they're designing, you're designing, you're all working together, they're giving you feedback, you're giving them feedback, you're finding out what does and doesn't work. Boom, design's approved. Within the same week, you're putting it out in front of a group of actual users, people that use your software on a day-to-day basis. Then you test it. You say, what do you think about this? Did it work? What could you do that you couldn't do before? Then you know, have you actually solved the problem in a better way? From there, you would go into maybe a few more design sprints or design tests. The big goal here is that no matter what you're doing, you're testing with users to make sure you're moving in the right direction. Just because it's visually more attractive doesn't mean it's better. Just because it's on a more modern stack or higher or cloud-based architecture, again, won't mean that it's better. It could be faster, but faster and clunky is still clunky and nobody wants to use it. At the end of the day, my goal is always to make even the most banal, simple, enterprise-based software be a fun thing that people can use. So what's onboarding that we can come up with that explains what they do? What are little micro interactions or transitions that we can do when they finish a goal, right? So they check off all their tasks, they log their time. What little notification can we give them that makes them go, hey, good job, you logged your time 5 days in a row? That makes them go, oh yeah, I have. I've logged my time 5 days in a row. Makes them want to come back for a 6th day, a 7th day, whatever it may be. What are the little items that we can work into like that? And we'll go into an actual design process of figuring those things out to solve the goals for the user. Because whatever that goal is, there's going to be multiple ways to solve it. And the plan isn't just to hope that cloud-based is going to fix it or a new design will fix it, but can we approach it from multiple levels so that we're always keeping in mind, so that we can add all these little items in that help you accomplish the goal of getting people to log their time daily. Can we figure out the ways to do this? And testing it to see if it works, and then rolling that out. From there, you'd actually create what's called a design system. So you'd have your whole user experience, what we at Rocks call the whole product experience, which is from the minute I see the logo on my desktop to the minute I log out for the day, the whole experience of what I felt is the whole product experience. And that's what we focus on. It's making sure that whole thing feels really cool, feels good, makes you want to use it. You want to test all that, make sure it's working. You want to design all that out. You want to make sure the development's kicking and it actually can accomplish the goals through fast, quick interactions that work. And you want to create a design system that defines how things work in different scenarios so that when you as a company comes up with a new idea, a new interesting way to approach a problem, you can have that design system used on those things by your developers. So what you don't end up having is sort of what becomes a major problem in a lot of enterprise software, which is a design team will come in, they'll design version A. Version A will be pretty damn good because the design team has spent time thinking about it. But by the time you get to version C or version D, well, it's not quite as good. Why? Well, because you don't bring the design team back in ever, or very rarely. And then engineers are just sort of figuring out how to solve problems because they're hearing real time from people on the ground. Well, hey, Rick, this problem's not working. This thing isn't doing what I need it to do. Can you fix it for me real quick? And they'll do a bug fix, but they don't have an interesting visual way to solve that. So they just come up with something. And engineers aren't designers, and they're not thinking about user interactivity, user motivation, inspiring action, inspiring infinity, and all the other stuff that we worry about when we create user experience. When you create a design system, what you're doing is you're giving the developer a suite of visual elements plus a guideline that says, okay, in this scenario, if you need to add this kind of a feature in, here's what a list view looks like. Here's what the login looks like. Here's what a profile image looks like. Here's what a deselected state looks like. You give them all the different items they need to be able to quickly to build a new feature, to build a new module without having to redesign everything. They just use what's already been designed. If that new thing they're trying out works really well, awesome. Now you can roll it back to the designers and say, cool, people like this. Can you make it just a little bit better? And designers may find a better way to implement it so the visual interface is even better, but at least you're on a good path. And design systems like this are a huge benefit for companies that have actual real software they're trying to do all the time. You can't go back to a designer and go through the whole design process, right? Business works so much faster than that. Sometimes you have to solve a problem in a weekend. Sometimes you have a big issue with a big customer or an internal product, and if that thing's not fixed, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. So developers have to fix it. A design system lets them do it so it doesn't get broken and then get stuck in the machine in a busted, non-interactive way, non-intuitive way for years to come. And those all just kind of work together. They're really exciting things to do. So, if you are Dylan, which would be happy to talk to you, you can shoot me an email after this at q.manning@rocksawstudios.com. Or if you're anybody else, you just want to reach out, chat with us, you can do howdy@rocksawstudios.com. We're happy to chat with you. We don't have a one-size-fits-all mentality. You know, we've helped clients out with just literal strategy where we just come in and go, here's where your market that's not working. And then we've built full-blown front-end, back-end, interface design, you know, whole kit and caboodle from marketing idea all the way to actual website that launches with teasers and things like that to banner ads and front end, back end, payment systems and all that stuff, designed and developed and built all that together, right? So we really do come in and just listen to you. And the only thing that we bring to the equation that we're sticklers about is just wanting to listen to the user, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. That's all that really matters. What do your users have to say? Are they happy to use what you're building them? If the answer is yes, that means success for you. If the answer is no, that means you may have a bad time. So we just always want to say, let's listen to what the users have to say. Let's try to figure out what's going to make them the happiest and motivate them to do what you want them to do. Sometimes that won't be anything we've thought of before we walked in the door. We'll come up with it together, and it's a good time. So you can reach out to us, chat with us. You can always go to rocksawstudios.com. You can head over to our YouTube channel and look at more videos. I'll talk about this kind of stuff a lot. Our Q&A series is pretty much in depth about design thinking, design sprints, design systems, how to bring innovation into a company, that type of thing. Because we've worked with some pretty large organizations that had never thought once about digital transformation and innovation. And we walk out having built action figures for them that, you know, sit on an executive's desk because that was the right thing to do for the problem we were trying to solve. So we're happy to help you out. So with that, thanks for tuning in. Free Design Hour ran a little long, but that's always great. Biggest deal is that if you have a design problem you want us to work on, you know, real time, happy to do it. That's what this hour is for. Otherwise, I'll talk about design issues, Figma, I'll come up with basic problems that I know that we have on a general basis and help our clients out with and show you how we solve those problems. So until then, I'll see you next time. I'm Q Manning, General Manager of Rockstar Studios. Adios.